Welcome to Do It for the Case Law for Thursday, August 20th, 2026. Visit doitforthecaselaw.com to listen to more in-depth per-case reporting. Today, we are covering 51 federal appellate decisions across 5 reporter beats. Do It for the Case Law is a news reporting service. We summarize and discuss federal appellate opinions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes legal advice. Let's turn to James covering criminal justice.
Thanks, David. I have 15 cases from the 10th, 11th, 4th, 7th, and 8th circuits. The disposition mix includes 12 affirmances, 1 reversal, and 2 split outcomes where the court affirmed in part and reversed in part or remanded. We start with a reversal from the 7th Circuit. In United States v. Peter Braun, the panel reversed the district court's grant of a motion to suppress evidence in a criminal prosecution for producing illegal image material. The appellate court held that the search warrant affidavit established probable cause even after excluding descriptions of images viewed by an agent without a warrant, finding the untainted information sufficient under the totality of the circumstances. Next, we have a significant split outcome from the 8th Circuit involving election speech. In Minnesota Voters Alliance against Keith Ellison, the court affirmed the denial of a preliminary injunction in part but reversed and remanded for entry of an injunction in favor of the plaintiffs regarding Minnesota Statute Section 2193. The court applied strict scrutiny because the statute was a content-based regulation targeting core political speech about voter eligibility, ruling that false statements about voting rights are not historically unprotected categories like fraud or defamation. Moving to the 10th Circuit, we have 2 affirmed cases. In United States v. Khan, the panel affirmed convictions for unlawful dispensing of controlled substances, conspiracy to distribute resulting in death, and engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. The court rejected challenges to expert testimony on legal standards and sufficiency of evidence. Also in the 10th, United States v. Dawson was affirmed regarding a felon in possession sentence where the court upheld applying 2 criminal history points for prior juvenile sentences despite missing discharge dates in the record. Over in the 11th Circuit, 3 cases were affirmed without argument. In United States v. Haidar Ebo Aded al-Muntasir, the court affirmed a 60-month sentence for conspiracy to commit international money laundering, finding no plain error in the variance explanation. In United States v. Austin Michael Burak, convictions for abusive sexual contact of a child and aggravated sexual abuse were upheld, with jurisdiction over Daubert claims dismissed as unappealed from magistrate orders. In United States v. James Jason Riani, the court affirmed the denial of compassionate release, finding the district court properly weighed statutory factors regarding extraordinary circumstances. Turning to the 4th Circuit, 2 cases came down. In United States v. Wesley Shane Haggerty, the court affirmed a conviction for unlawful possession of a firearm as a felon, holding that Second Amendment challenges to this statute are foreclosed by prior precedent under Bruin and Rahimi. In Fareed Hayat against Sergeant Casey Diaz, the court affirmed summary judgment for police officers who entered a home without a warrant, ruling there was reasonable suspicion of child kidnapping based on a reliable tip and exigent circumstances. Finally, 5 cases were affirmed from the 8th Circuit covering various criminal issues. In United States v. Wesley Shane Haggerty, the court affirmed a conviction for unlawful possession of a firearm as a felon, holding that Second Amendment challenges to this statute are foreclosed by prior precedent under Bruin and Rahimi. In Fareed Hayat against Sergeant Casey Diaz, the court affirmed summary judgment for police officers who entered a home without a warrant, ruling there was reasonable suspicion of child kidnapping based on a reliable tip and exigent circumstances. Finally, 5 cases were affirmed from the 8th Circuit covering various criminal issues. In United States v. West, David Enrique Remigio, the sentence and restitution order for receiving illegal images were upheld despite claims about victim loss evidence. In United States v. Dardius Damon Robinson, the conviction for fentanyl distribution was affirmed after rejecting a challenge to a firearms sentencing enhancement. In United States v. Joshua Nesbitt, convictions for drug trafficking, murder, witness tampering, and robbery were upheld, including the denial of severance from co-defendant Sean Burkhalter. In United States v. Todd K. Boyd, the court affirmed revocation of supervised release and imprisonment, distinguishing mandatory revocation factors from discretionary ones. In United States v. Kentrill Van Treese Powell, a sentence for felon in possession was affirmed after rejecting a challenge to an assault enhancement based on attempted battery evidence. Back to you, David.
Thanks, James. Now for civil rights coverage with Aisha.
Thanks, David. 10 cases in this block, 9 affirmed, 1 dismissed, and 1 vacated and remanded. The 8th Circuit's decision to vacate and remand is the only change to a lower court outcome. In that case, the district court dismissed a civil rights claim because the plaintiff lacked standing under state law to sue on behalf of a decedent. But the 8th Circuit held this was a prudential standing issue rather than a jurisdictional bar. The appellate court ruled that Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 17 requires a district court to allow a reasonable time for a real party in interest to ratify or join the action before dismissal. Moving to the 9th Circuit, the court affirmed a jury verdict finding retaliation and constructive discharge against municipal utility officials under Title VII and Section 1983. holding that reprimands and unjustified reassignments constituted adverse actions supported by substantial evidence. The same circuit also dismissed an interlocutory appeal from police officers challenging qualified immunity because the dispute centered on the admissibility of a witness declaration rather than whether undisputed facts established a constitutional violation. In the 10th Circuit, 3 pro se cases were affirmed involving filing restrictions for a plaintiff deemed to file frivolous lawsuits, a dismissal of due process claims regarding a school bathroom incident where a student's privacy was violated, and a denial of relief from judgment based on excusable neglect. The 11th Circuit affirmed summary judgments in disability discrimination and whistleblower retaliation cases, ruling that an employer had no duty to provide undefined help or leave without pay, and that the evidence did not support a but-for-causation inference for retaliation. Another 11th Circuit case affirmed the dismissal of a pro se complaint where the plaintiff failed to amend pleadings as ordered. Finally, the 4th Circuit affirmed summary judgment for a fire department against an age discrimination claim, finding the plaintiff could not prove he met the employer's legitimate performance expectations. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Aisha. Now for constitutional challenges and habeas appeals, here is Michael.
Thanks, David. 3 constitutional and prisoner litigation cases today across 3 circuits. The disposition roll-up 1 reversal and 2 affirmances. Leading with the reversal in the 9th Circuit, the court overturned a district court's conditional grant of habeas relief to Jonathan Skenandor. The appellate panel held that the state court's rejection of his guilty plea claim was not an unreasonable application of clearly established federal law under Section 2254. The record showed counsel explained the charges and elements before Skenandor entered a voluntary plea, satisfying due process requirements under Bradshaw and Henderson. Moving to the 10th Circuit, the court affirmed the dismissal of Miguel Garcia's Section 1983 action. The prisoner failed to prove his conviction had been invalidated through post-conviction proceedings, meaning his civil rights claim is barred by haec vipros. Finally, in the 11th Circuit, an 8-page opinion affirmed summary judgment for defendants in a medical care case involving Bobby L. Steverson. The court found no 8th Amendment violation where nurses and dentists repeatedly evaluated the inmate and secured referrals to specialists. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Michael. Let's turn to Maria for the business and labor rulings.
Thanks, David. 16 cases in this Block 1 vacature and remand, 2 reversals and remands, 1 affirmation of a sentence on remand, 6 affirmances, and 5 dismissals or denials.
In the 11th Circuit, the court vacated and remanded the Department of Transportation's order terminating the joint venture approval between Delta Airlines and Aerolíneas de Mexico. The court held that the agency acted arbitrarily by departing from its precedent without adequate explanation, specifically by relying on a single airport analysis instead of a comprehensive market review. Moving to the 9th Circuit, the panel reversed and remanded the dismissal of Can-Am Fuel Distribution's claims under the Petroleum Marketing Practices Act. The court clarified that a franchise relationship exists even if the refiner does not physically supply the fuel, as long as the trademark is used in connection with the sale of motor fuel. Also in the 9th Circuit, the en banc court denied petitions for review by labor unions and granted enforcement of an NLRB order awarding maintenance work to the International Association of Machinists. The court held that the work preservation defense does not apply to unfair labor practice charges regarding jurisdictional disputes under Section 8 of the National Labor Relations Act. Back in the 4th Circuit, the court affirmed a 240-month sentence for methamphetamine conspiracy after remand from the Supreme Court. The panel found the defendant's plea agreement waiver valid and determined that the sentencing error did not constitute a miscarriage of justice.
The Mandatory Victim Restitution Act retroactively to 1996 order violates the ex post facto clause. The decision extends the liability period for restitution beyond what was available under prior law. Turning back to the 11th Circuit for remaining appeals, the court affirmed the denial of attorney's fees against YouTube in a copyright dispute involving Athos Overseas.
The court found the litigation was not frivolous and properly exercised judicial discretion. Also in the 11th Circuit, an affirmation went to Costco in a negligence case where the plaintiff failed to prove an employee agreed to lift a heavy grill. The 4th Circuit similarly affirmed a district court judgment for Costco regarding the same incident. The 4th Circuit also denied a petition for review against black lung benefits awarded to Richard Estudillo under the Department of Labor's Benefits Review Board, finding substantial evidence supported the award.
In the 9th Circuit, summary judgment was affirmed for Danielle Tarrin in a fraud on the court claim brought by Omni Hotels. The court found no material issue regarding whether her fitness activities contradicted her testimony about pain.
Finally, 5 cases were dismissed or denied due to procedural barriers. The 11th Circuit dismissed 3 appeals for lack of jurisdiction, 2 bankruptcy cases where orders were not final, and 1 civil appeal filed by a prisoner more than 30 days after judgment. A 4th dismissal occurred in the 9th Circuit for a labor dispute petition that was procedurally barred. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Maria. Now for immigration and government law with Raj.
Thanks, David. I have 6 cases from the 11th and 9th circuits to cover today. The disposition roll-up is 1 dismissal, 4 denials, and 1 affirmation. Starting with the 11th Circuit, Ule Montes de Oca Beltran's petition was dismissed in part and denied in part regarding his second motion to reopen removal proceedings, where the court found the board did not abuse its discretion because the motion was untimely and equitable tolling did not apply due to a 7-month delay without explanation. In a tax case, the court affirmed the tax court's imposition of a 40% penalty for gross valuation misstatement against Mill Road 36 Henry Limited Liability Company, upholding the valuation of a conservation easement at $0 rather than the $8.9 million claimed based on comparable sales data. Moving to the 9th Circuit, the court denied 3 immigration petitions. Moreno Gaona and others failed to prove the Colombian government could not control cartel threats. Felipe Antonio Valdez Garcia could not demonstrate exceptional and extremely unusual hardship for his U.S. citizen son, and Vega Rodriguez and others were unable to establish a nexus between persecution by El Tren de Aragua and a protected ground, as they were targeted for their business profits rather than political opinion. Finally, the 9th Circuit affirmed the tax court's denial of litigation costs and sanctions against Jacobs, ruling the commissioner's position was substantially justified because critical documentation was not provided until after the answer was filed. Back to you, David.
That wraps up the broadcast for Thursday, August 26th, 2026. Thank you to James Taylor for his report on 15 criminal justice cases, Aisha Johnson for 10 civil rights opinions, Michael Reeves for 3 constitutional law rulings, Maria Santos for 17 business and labor decisions, and Raj Patel for 6 immigration and government appeals. Today's docket featured 2 significant reversals or remands that will warrant close attention, while 30 cases were affirmed and 8 appeals were dismissed on procedural grounds. Visit doitforthecaselaw.com to listen to more in-depth per-case reporting. Do It for the Case Law is a news reporting service. We summarize and discuss published federal appellate opinions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes legal advice. We are not lawyers. If you need legal counsel, consult a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. Please subscribe and follow us for tomorrow's update.